Hello and welcome to the Internal Comms podcast with me, Katie Macaulay. If you're passionate about improving the way we communicate at work, then you are in exactly the right place. Every fortnight, I sit down with a communications practitioner, author, consultant, or academic, and together we tease out ways to make people feel more informed, more inspired, more involved at work. I'm going to keep my intro to this episode very brief because honestly, if you listen to just one conversation about communication this year, I recommend it's this one. My guest is Jeremy Connell-Waite, communication designer, speechwriter, and IBM's chief storyteller. If you're looking for inspiration, searching for your why, if you're wondering how to make a real difference inside your organisation, then this episode is for you. Jeremy reveals how great business communication doesn't just inform, it makes people feel something so that they do something. He shares how the best stories use surprise, optimism, and far fewer words than you may think. Now, this conversation is packed with insights and practical resources, but don't worry if you miss something. There is a full transcript, show notes and links on AB's website. That's abcom, abcom.co.uk/podcasts. So without further ado, sit back and enjoy this inspiring conversation with Jeremy Connell-Waite. Jeremy, it is an honour and a privilege to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
We're going to have so much fun. I can't wait. This is going to be great. No, thanks for having me.
I will have done an introduction to you before this conversation starts, but because your job title is so intriguing, I thought we could set the scene for listeners. You're on a plane. You've got a stranger sat next to you who says, "What do you do for a living?" How do you respond to that question?
I'd like to say that I'm a storyteller. I'm kind of a mixture between a storyteller and a speechwriter. Speechwriter's probably my favorite part because there's not many around, and it kind of begs the question, who do you write for? What do you do? And how do you write? Because you don't hear about that very much anymore. It's like one of these lost arts.
Yes.
You know, the art of rhetoric and persuasion. You hear about it in politics, but you don't hear about it much in terms of sort of entertainment and business. So I called myself a communications designer just because I draw speeches. And people go, "Oh, you write speeches. No, you're a speechwriter." I'm like, no. Look at some of my stuff. I draw speeches. Like I physically draw it and color it in. The shape, the emotion, how it's going to make an audience feel. So I design communications. But whilst I've been in marketing most of my career, I don't actually sit in marketing. I'm not in comms. I'm not kind of a traditional internal comms person. So I sit with executives and consultants, scientists and researchers trying to help them tell their story. So a little bit of performance coaching in there as well, exec coaching stuff. But let's go with storyteller and speechwriter.
Love it. Were you born to do this job, do you think?
I think I was. I was thinking about this the other day. I remember when I was at school and I went to the careers officer, and I think I must have been 15, 16. I'm 52, so I was fourth year, I think. And you meet your careers officer and they say, "Right, Jeremy, what are you going to do?" And you have to do the thing that makes your parents happy or what's on the list of these are the jobs that you could have. Nothing to do with the fact that the job you'll end up having hasn't been invented yet for most people.
Exactly.
And I was like, "Oh, okay. I want to be an accountant. Do I want to be an accountant?" And I watched Wall Street with Gordon Gekko. You remember with the red braces?
Absolutely.
I'm from Salford and I wore red braces and got how I didn't get beat up regularly. As a 14-year-old or something, going to the shop to buy the Financial Times, pretending to be Gordon Gekko. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into the stock market and be a stockbroker and stuff. Anyway, I think I would have hated it. I love people and I love numbers, and I accidentally fell into social media at the right time when nobody knew how to recruit for social media. It was literally people that can understand data and how large groups of people move, and then you've got to love the people that are going to do the thing. So that set me on a trajectory to marketing, the love of storytelling, and ultimately a love of speech writing. And along the way, just wanting to be purpose driven.
Yes.
Like, without getting all deep super quick, like, how can you actually tell a story that's going to make a difference and move people to act, that's going to make the world work better in some way, no matter how small? So yeah, so I'm absolutely doing what I love. It doesn't even feel like work anymore.
What a great feeling.
Don't tell my boss that, because he looks after me and pays me well. But no, it's a lot of fun.
We're going to talk about storytelling, stories a lot in this conversation. So I guess we should do a little bit around sort of definitions up front. I mean, it's my observation that all too often you see on a company website, our story, and you click on it and you think you might get a story, but you don't. You get a string of facts.
Yeah.
How do you define what is actually a story?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so there's a really short version, which one of our mutual friends, Aaron Sorkin, likes to say. It's only 2 words. A story has to have intention and obstacle.
Yes.
That's it. Somebody has to want something really bad, something huge is standing in their way. And usually the thing that is standing in their way is so big and so formidable, and they can't get past it on their own. And therefore, some sort of a transformation journey happens with our protagonist, right? And you've got hero's journeys. There's millions of different structures we could go into if you wanted to. If you was to go kind of one stage deeper, and especially for the folks listening, and they're making notes, if you want something practical about what a story is versus what it's not, a story is not about something dramatic that happened. Somebody said to me the other day, like, imagine Gladiator, or, you're in the Colosseum and you're watching, the lions and the gladiators doing their thing. That's going to be really interesting for a short period of time, but you're going to have lots of drama, and then more fighting, and then more people die, and more and you just, after a while, it's going to get a bit,
Yes. Amy.
There's no intention and obstacle. And you kind of need there to be, it's not just a list of things that happened. So if you was to date all the way back, if you was to be a real student of storytelling, you're going to end up in 335 BC with Aristotle, probably looking at a pamphlet that was I think it was about 62 pages long, called Poetics. And it's where the 3-act structure came from. It's why we have 3-act structures in theatre. It's why even TED is 3-act structures of talks, 3 6-minute. But essentially, it just goes like this. Somebody wants something really badly, and something huge is standing in their way, right? They meet a guide that gives them a plan, that calls them to action so that they live happily ever after. So, somebody wants something really badly, and then these things are standing in their way. They might be internal problems, internal comms, external problems or market forces. You might have philosophical, existential crises, big obstacles, usually one big thing. And they meet a guide. And that guide is going to have empathy, and they're going to have authority. They're going to have the head and the heart, right? The left brain, the right brain. So that they come and they give you a plan, because they can navigate their way through this messy transformation, like Gollum, I don't know, trying to get you through Middle-earth. They give you a plan that calls you to action, that ends up in comedy or tragedy, hopefully success. That's it. All story is where somebody goes into the start of that journey, and they end it transformed in some way.
Yes.
If they are not transformed, it's not a story.
Yes.
And that's why when you just see dramatic events, or you see just sequences of things that happened, it doesn't make you feel, doesn't take you on that emotional roller coaster of a journey, like the way that we'd binge watch something on Netflix, or, watching Beast Games or something.
Yes. Yes.
It is. It's a roller coaster. It's a transformation.
How important is the element of surprise, do you think? Because what you're describing there has a moment of, more than one moment of surprise, potentially. Is that a critical element?
What are you watching at the moment? Have you got a favorite show, or a movie, or a mini series?
I've just been watching something that I'll put the link in the show notes because no one will know about it. It's called Drops of God. And if you are in any way interested in wine, then it's about 6 or 7 episodes, one season. It is brilliant.
Have you watched a few of them back to back?
Yes, I binged it completely. Yes.
What was it that surprised you about that show?
At every turn, it's taking you down a path and then flips the script, and you're seeing something from a completely different perspective. You didn't see it coming. It makes perfect sense in retrospect, but you didn't see it in advance.
And the reason that works, I mean, because that's why it's the magic ingredient of storytelling. And what actually happens when you surprise an audience and you show them the world in a way they didn't expect, especially wine, something about something that you absolutely love, your emotions have been proven scientifically to intensify by 400%.
Wow.
So if you are surprised, you get something that you didn't expect, your emotions intensify by 400%. That's connected to dopamine. And dopamine's that, the thing that makes us want more and more of stuff. What happened next, right? And that's when we're on the edge of our seat and we want to binge watch, just like I'm into Beast Games at the moment. And it's just the typical cliffhanger all the time. And you've got to do the next one, just like on The Traitors or something, because there's an element of surprise.
Yes.
If you knew that was coming, just like, with all respect, we've got Valentine's Day coming up. You might get some flowers on Valentine's Day. You might love them, but you might not be surprised.
Yes.
It'll make you feel warm and fuzzy. Now, if you got them tonight, that might take you off. And it might be, oh my gosh, thank you so much for the thing. And somebody remembered something that they've done. Your emotions intensify. There's another really interesting side of it. Not just that storytellers are there to drive an emotional response, because you could argue that storytelling is just there to make you feel something. That's it, really. And in business, we want you to feel something so that you do something, So I like that analogy, but it's all rooted in emotions. The other thing, if you did want to go into, is that it's also been scientifically proven that surprise is the only emotion that can change the biological makeup in your brain to move you from a negative state of mind to a positive one.
Wow.
So when you look at even persuasion and influence and words and language, rhetoric, Chris Voss, right? An amazing guest you had early on your show. I love Chris Voss to bits. Tactical empathy.
Yes.
A lot of what he's talking about is the element of surprise to get a win-win, sometimes with a hostile audience.
Yes.
And that element of surprise is often trying to move people from a negative mindset to a positive one.
Yes.
But you need to have this very tactical application of emotional intelligence when you're trying to persuade and influence, which is why words and language have been used for bad as well, right?
Yeah.
Speechwriters in the political world sometimes indirectly have a bad reputation because of the way that you can manipulate audiences.
For sure. Yeah.
We've seen a lot of that at the moment. Some of it's fake, some of it's real.
Yeah.
But surprise. Yeah. If that's one of the only things, that people take away from this episode, next time you're trying to write a speech or a story or a presentation, or maybe you're sat trying to coach your team, or even if you're going for a promotion, you're going for an interview, think about what that audience is expecting you to say and ask yourself, how could I surprise this audience by giving them something they don't expect? I ask my guys to do that all the time. I'm like, look, they're expecting 300 slides with a white background and 500 words on each slide. And they're probably expecting you to read them as well. Some people do that, so don't do that. But surprise, don't use slides. Draw it on a flip chart or a whiteboard.
Can you imagine Simon Sinek's start with why speech if he hadn't have used the little flip chart on a pen? It would just not have been the same, would it?
I did an event with Simon a while ago, and it was at the Science Museum in London. Have you ever been in the Science Museum?
Only once recently for an awards night.
It's the most amazing theatre. You've got the IMAX theatre inside, and Simon knew that he had access to this IMAX theatre with this incredible screen. Now, any other presenter is going to go into that venue, and people were spending thousands. It was a very small group of us, but they were spending thousands to go and see him to do basically a 3-hour session. You would look at that screen and go, oh my goodness, like in the Sphere, in Las Vegas, I am going to make the most of this technology if it kills me. I'm going to have slides and animations and videos, and none of that. Got it. Same thing. He stayed on brand. He got his flip chart. He drew it, just had his marker. And honestly, it's one of the best exhibitions I've ever seen live as a presenter, where 3.5 hours with only one break, no slides, just a marker pen and a flip chart, because he was that good at engaging an audience and solving a problem. The only other person I've seen Al Gore do that, but John Maxwell's a leadership coach in America.
Yes.
I've seen him do that a lot. 6 hours, just sat on a stool, talking to an audience with no slides whatsoever for 6 hours. and it's just phenomenal. You don't need the glitz
No.
and the glamour if you're good enough.
I think it's John Maxwell's quote. An audience doesn't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. Have you heard that?
That is a good one. Another one of my favorite quotes of his: people are not persuaded by what you say, but by what they understand.
Oh,
Isn't that a good one? Like, we're all here so desperate to tell our stories and to, here's what you should know. He's like, no. It's not about that. What do they understand? The audience is always the hero.
yes.
Put
Yes.
yourself in their shoes, like massive amounts of empathy. It's not about you. You're not the hero. Nobody really cares what you think anyway. How can you help them to think differently? What will they understand? I
Yes.
love that. John Maxwell's awesome.
When we chatted earlier to sort of prepare for this, we were talking about storytelling about organizations. And you said there's always two sides to the performance story.
I love the idea of performance, and I don't think anyone's done anything on this, actually, performance-driven storytelling. I started to play around with the idea of purpose-driven storytelling and being purpose-driven, and there's nothing new there. I mean, everyone seems to attach purpose to everything, even though a lot of the time they shouldn't. But the idea of performance-driven, I like that because there's two sides to that coin. And I work for a very large organization with a lot of people and a lot of money at stake with some of the decisions that we're helping advise people on. And it's all performance-driven. We got to keep stakeholders happy. We've got to keep shareholders happy. We're looking at Wall Street. We're speaking to analysts. We got all of our employees and everyone internally. It's performance. Performance. How are we going to do? What's the metric? What's the value of a story? I love attaching values to a story. There's lots of wrong ways that you can do it, and there's lots of ways that it would absolutely fail. I used to value audiences at Facebook many years ago, and some companies even went bankrupt trying to put a value on an audience or a value on a story. But they were really looking at tracking the performance, some sort of KPI. But I also like the other side of it, that it's not all science and maths. There's an art to it that's beautiful. And there's a side to it that's going to be the ta-da, how do you stand up on stage and engage that audience in a way with charisma, with presence, with so much love and engagement. You're there to serve them and build trust and do all these wonderful things. And there should be an element of performance in the way that we bring our stories to life. So if you think that a story is there to make you feel something so that you do something, this is why I think there's a book waiting to be written here somewhere. The feel something so that you do something. Feel something is the performance of the bringing it to life. And the do something is the performance in terms of what did it do?
Yes.
Al Gore often said many times and kind of reminded me that if you're going to write a speech, that the only judge of a good speech, the only metric, what did the audience do afterwards?
Right.
What did they do next? And if you're in climate change, if you're trying to drive some sort of a movement, if you're in business, did they change their attitude? Did they, use their voice, their vote? Did they change their choices? Like, what did they do? And you're tracking that element of performance. So yeah, I think what seems to happen in comms is that people kind of skew towards the edges, and it's like they almost go all in on one side. It's never balanced enough. It's either they're all in on performance in terms of money and metrics, and we've got to impress the CIO, the CTO, the CFO especially, and marketing and comms is especially guilty of that. They go all in on the performance of how do we bring it to life with preference, consideration, awareness, engagement, traditional marketing metric around uplift and sometimes NPS. And they're looking at the performance side of here's how it made me feel, and I got this many impressions and this many eyeballs, and it was gorgeous, which is also good. We need that. But you go and take that to a CFO and they're like, no, that doesn't.
Yes, exactly.
You got no budget. I'm not buying that.
Where's the proof?
Additional headcount? Yeah, that's not going to happen. But look how it made them feel. It's like, move on. You need both.
You need both. You need both.
You want the head and the heart. Yeah. Sure.
This episode of the Internal Comms podcast is brought to you by AB, the world's longest established internal communications agency. Since 1964, AB has been trusted by many of the world's most complex, most high-profile organizations with their employee communication. From robust, comprehensive audits to creative campaigns, we deliver bespoke solutions and measurable results. To see case studies of our work and to discuss your next internal comms challenge, email us at hello@abcom.co.uk. AB, crafting award-winning internal communication for more than 60 years. How do you find these great stories, and then how do you structure them?
It's my observation, and I don't know whether it's a lack of imagination. I always think about the 30-year service. Jane Doe's just done 30 years service. No one wants to read that story on the internet for a second. They might read about the biggest lessons she's learned in that career, or the biggest mistake she's ever made, or the letter she'd write to a younger self. So it's something to do with angle, but it's got to be a bit more than that. How do we find these great stories, and then how do we structure them?
Okay, so there's two very big answers to both of those. Gosh, how do we find them? I think there's a side of it that, like, you've got to be obsessed in terms of, you've got to really, really want to do it. You've got to love the work. You've got to be passionate. I almost said passionate then. I think there's so much around people who are passionately driven to do things, and that's just not enough, just to have that kind of emotional drive. The thing is, it might have been Brendan Burchard that said this a while ago, maybe on one of the performance podcasts. But anyway, Brendan Burchard wrote High Performance Habits, wonderful author. He talks about where if you're passionate about something, everybody loves that. Like, I found my passion. There's a lot of people in the industry at the moment saying passion's the worst thing in the world, especially if you're a startup, you're an entrepreneur. Don't do something based on your passion. But that doesn't offend anybody, because people love that. You found your passion, wine, you want to be, great. Let's talk about that. When you're obsessed by something, you're kind of on the edges. You start to get, like, this is keeping me up at night. It's getting me out of bed in the morning. It's the only thing I talk about. It's the only thing I read. I'm geeking out to levels of colors of ink, down to, like, we're going deep on this, but I'm obsessed. And what sometimes happens is people are like, oh, Jeremy, that's just calm down a bit. Just, easy, tiger. Just, tone it down. Because it's almost like you're too intense. But there is a level of, if you want to be up there as one of the best, there has to be a level of obsession. And when you are so driven to know that stories can genuinely change things for the better, and you see the impact of that. And as I started to get more and more obsessed with helping other people to find their own voice and their own stories, and I get more and more turned on by that, that becomes just, somewhere between passion and obsession. I'm just collecting stories like this is the favorite thing in the world. And I sometimes block out half a day when all I do, I'm like an architect. I'm either going to be structuring stories that I've seen before, or like I'm some archaeologist that's about to go digging. And I might go on a site, I might be on masterclass.com, I might be on a research site, and all I'm doing is digging for stories.
Right.
And it might take me 4 hours of nothing to get through all that coal, right?
Yeah.
There'll be a diamond somewhere.
Yes.
But the joy in finding that story because I've put in the work and the effort with my level of obsession, some others might have just given up after 40 minutes. Well, it's a lot of coal, forget it.
Yes.
So I don't know that there's a quick answer to that, because you've got to love it to put the effort in, because storytelling is hard. It's not a soft skill, AI can take you so far, but it's just such a human craft.
Yeah.
Telling really, really good stories. You need to find something that is connected to your deepest passions that you can then find a career in, that you can turn into that obsession that's going to help you hopefully make a lot of money and inspire a lot of people. So for me, that was a very specific journey.
Yes.
I've used processes like Ikigai in the past
Yes.
to try and figure out how I find my why. I love Simon stuff around find your why, but I think it sometimes feels a bit too superficial. It's like a cliche bumper sticker of,
Okay.
what's your why? I want to do this so that this happens. Whereas something like Ikigai gets deep into what drives you. Not what keeps you up at night. That's not enough. That doesn't inspire anybody. What gets me out of bed in the morning? And how can I articulate that in a way that turns into a job that someone wants to pay me for? And for me, that's going to be that obsessive desire to find better and better and better stories and better speeches. And you've got to crawl through a lot of crap.
Yes.
You've got to listen to a lot of bad TED Talks.
Well, that was my next question, because you must have seen this happen or heard this happen many times. And your head is in your hands because you're thinking, you just killed that story. It could have been fantastic and you just didn't bring it to life. You didn't connect with it. What a missed opportunity. Yeah. Is there one mistake that people make over and over again that just absolutely kills a story in the telling of it?
Well, apart from them being too self-obsessed and forgetting that the audience is the hero, there's lots of places for that when you can, you are there to talk about yourself. If it's biography, thought leadership to a degree. If you're a real expert in your field, especially if you're educating, you're doing a lecture or some form of a seminar, for the most part, it is that case of, you've not understood enough what the audience wants to hear.
Yes.
You've not thought enough, someone in the audience is sat there thinking, I want that speaker to understand what I feel.
Yes.
And what I'm thinking. And the speaker hasn't put themselves in their shoes well enough. But I think a slightly more flippant reply to that question would be, they speak for too long.
Oh, really?
That's it. They speak for too long. Just shut up, speak, take however much time you've got, cut it in half.
Yes.
Philip Collins, who used to be Tony Blair's speechwriter, even when they'd pruned a speech to death, on the morning of the speech, they'd still cut it by another 10%. And they got into the habit of doing that because no one's ever going to tell you off for having a short speech. In fact, John F. Kennedy, President Kennedy, used to say, if anybody speaks for longer than 12 minutes, the audience is just thinking about food and sex anyway. So he's like, come on, you got 12 minutes. Maybe you get 18 on a TED stage. But no, Al Gore does some wonderful presentations that he calls Truth in 10. They're 10-minute speeches and they're amazing. Yeah. Though other people would have done that in 40.
Yeah.
He's like, why 40 minutes if I can get the job done in 10?
Yeah. Don't bury the lead, as we used to say in news.
Yeah, exactly. Just be quiet. Come on.
We're recording this at the start of a new year. People might be thinking about, career development, setting their career goals. You mentioned it earlier about sort of advising executives, coaching them. How do you help people unlock more of their own potential? It's a big question, I know.
It is a big question. And the thing is, that's what I love most about your work as well, by the way, just looking at what your agency does and the work that you've written, and the masterclass that you host. To me, it's just all about unlocking the potential in other people, right? So we've got this common vested, that love of how do we, because it's flipping hard.
Yes.
And there's a book, let me see if I can remember, Coaching for Performance. It's a wonderful book, Coaching for Performance. And the book opens, it's like a Bible for if you want to become a coach and you want to help other people, remove the obstacles standing in their way, help them be successful. It's like, that's the Bible for a lot of coaches. But right at the beginning of the book, it talks about the average business person is only working to about 40% of their potential.
Wow.
And it's reasonably anecdotal because it's based upon the surveys of all the people that have been through, multiple coaching programs, almost like an NPS style survey. But that, it just shows that, a lot of people, they don't know how to unlock that. And sometimes they're in the right company, but they've got the wrong manager. Sometimes they're in the wrong department and they've not yet figured that out. Again, it's why I think one of the stepping stones, I don't mean this to be a cliche or a bumper sticker again, but the reason that I love Ikigai is because I think that's a really good platform to help you find more of your potential, to help you find that thing that you should be passionate about that unlocks your potential. Because for anyone looking through it, especially if anyone's never heard the phrase before, Ikigai is Ikigai. So it's a Japanese phrase from Okinawa. What the Japanese think Ikigai means is very different to what Westerners mean, but that's a whole different story. Okay. But the way that we've interpreted it is that you have what you are good at and what you're paid for, what do you love and what the world needs. And if you found your why, these 4 circles, like a big Venn diagram, all overlap. Now, what that actually means in reality is that what I'm good at and what I'm paid for is my job.
Yes.
It's my job description. Hopefully they're the same thing. And it's really interesting to see how much those 2 circles overlap or not. I'm good at this. Maybe you've evolved and you're now good at these other things, but it's not part of your job description yet. Your perfect job's going to, well, get those two to overlap first. But then what do I really, really love? And that may even be going back to childhood. It might
Yes.
be BMXs and Lego and dance and art and painting, and there might be church and sports and all sorts of stuff in there. And then what does the world need? What do you think that the world needs? You're going to be passionate about something.
Yes.
Something purpose-driven, something that's maybe a legacy-based thing you're going to be super proud of. But those are usually things that go often outside of work, or it's voluntary, or it's feedback. So that's my give back. It's not in my 40 hours, what I love, what the world needs. The process of Ikigai is about, okay, how do I get the love and the passion and the obsession with what the world needs? How do I get that to overlap with what I'm good at, what I get paid for?
Yes.
And because I've coached so many hundreds of execs through a similar process, and we've often framed it in different ways, that's been the start in the light bulb for unlocking more of their potential, to inspire a bigger audience, to move into a new field, to invent a new product, to lead a team in a different way, works in family, works in business. I love that. Because I think at the end of the day, Katie, I don't want to be cheesy, but I am being cheesy. I think we're here to build a business, to change the world and have fun.
Yes.
I think that's it. I think that's all it comes down to. And we should be able to do all three.
Yes.
Build a business, change the world in some small way. It doesn't always feel like it, especially not at the moment, but we should have tons of fun. If it's not fun, come on. What are we doing it for?
What a rallying cry. Thank you for that, Jeremy. Powerful stuff. This is the week that Edelman brought out their 2025 Trust Barometer.
Oh, they did, Davos.
Yeah, I saw you blogged about that. Do you want to just share with us, I think it'd be quite interesting, your reading of that research this time round?
Will everyone on the pod be aware of what the Trust Barometer is? I know it's all internal comms folks.
Let's give them the background. I always read it every year. I think it's so interesting for me how, it's 33,000 respondents, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a pretty robust study.
And they've been doing it for 25 years, and it's informed individuals. It's a good crowd. It is slightly skewed with the people that fill in a survey like that, but for the most part, it's showing what informed individuals in the workplace think and feel.
Yes.
And for the last few years, they've been releasing it at World Economic Forum in Davos, which we've had this week. But no, it's really interesting. I remember last year when it came out, there was two stats that stood out to me like a sore thumb. 88% of people were scared of losing their jobs, and 54% of people said that technology is changing too fast in ways that are not good for people like me. So I always keep an eye on it, just because it's almost like this barometer. It is like you've taken the pulse of what we don't have to believe it. It's definitely not true in certain countries, and it skews a lot across different geographies and certainly different technologies and industries. But it does show kind of the state of play when you've got in the UK, for example, CIPD, Chartered Institute of Professional Development, saying 9 out of 10 jobs are going to need to reskill by 2030. So I looked at the one this year. Let me see. I made a couple of notes because it was kind of connected to that, and it backed up a lot of the data that I've seen. And any statistic can be manipulated. Right. So that being said, it's nice to have some form of validation for what you feel.
Yes.
So 84% agree that employees need to be retrained or reskilled in order to remain competitive. Totally agree with that, right, for sure. People have serious concerns about levels of trust in AI. There was that dominated, looking at agentic AI and what AI is now doing to the workforce. The way, it is going to take some jobs, but it can also amplify what you love. It can be this amazing augmented assistant. Only 36% believe the next generation will be better off than we are today.
That's so scary.
Yeah, that's a bit of a rough one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unprecedented global decline in employer trust. That's close to the heart of all of your listeners, for sure.
Absolutely.
Business remains a more trusted institution than NGOs, government, or media. What was the last couple? 63% have major concerns about the credibility of news sources now. Almost 2/3 of people. It's just hard to know what's real. Job security, worried about innovations in AI. Scientists and teachers remain the most trusted leaders. Well, there was a lot of thinking around how certain leaders are believed, or at least perceived, to be willingly misleading audiences.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
it's more of a rallying cry to anything else. There's no blame, I don't think. It's kind of like you've got to just look at your own house,
Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
sometimes there should be some private conversations, maybe with yourself,
Yes.
about, am I guilty of that?
Yes.
Are we doing that here? Do we have a cognitive bias that we're
Yeah.
guilty of that? So I like that the trust barometer is like this flag that goes up
Yes.
that feels to me now like it's trying to keep people honest a little
Yes.
bit. Like, look, we're here to build trust. We're here to perform a service, you know, to our clients. You know, we are here to serve other people in one form or another. You know, trusted advisors, building trust across the. So yeah, it's a great study. If anyone hasn't seen it, just search
Yeah.
Edelman Trust Barometer 2025. It's a good read, and it's a pretty good deck as well.
It is.
Lots
It
of
is.
slides you can steal.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. You're making me wonder about the importance of optimism, I guess, because I read that and it's bleak. And I was wondering, what role do we have, what responsibility do we have to inject a little bit of optimism into the debate? And I guess we shouldn't sugarcoat things, gloss over things. If things are tough, we should say it. But how much is it? How important is optimism? It feels like it's really important at the
It does,
moment.
doesn't it? We got to keep each other. Yeah. Do you remember when the Earthshot Prize? Have you seen much of that stuff? David Attenborough kicked it off originally with Prince of Wales,
Yes.
and I love the Earthshot Prize. I just love everything about it and everything that it stands for. And Hannah and the team that's kind of leading the Earthshot Prize is phenomenal. If you don't know it, just do a quick Google and you'll just see this. Trying to use technologies to try and build new things. They're giving £1 million grants to 5 people each year. It's a phenomenal thing. But the reason I say that is because they have a little tiny equation privately that they have behind the scenes. They featured it in a book that they wrote about the Earthshot Prize originally. But it was urgency plus optimism equals action.
Ah.
I mean, that's one to go in the back of your notebook, or, you know, stick on a
Yeah.
Post-it note in front of your screen. Because I think, you know, that's what we need. We need urgency. We need optimism if we want to get stuff done. Urgency plus optimism equals action. And it was very much
Yeah.
the Sir David Attenborough thing. I love that. But I've also just been reading an IBM book for where our values were written. It's an old one. It's like 1962. And the son of our founders, a guy called Thomas J. Watson Jr., and he wrote a book called A Business and Its Beliefs. And it was basically an internal comms book for how IBM should communicate.
Whoa.
And it was written as like a love letter to employees. You can still buy it. It's called Business and Its Beliefs, 1962. It's gorgeous. And the thing is, they were looking at how do you become successful within the workplace, especially with massive amounts of change happening
Right.
at an unprecedented speed. And this is the early 60s. So you've got, you know, political unrest. You've got everything that's going on with the Cold War. You're about to have the space race, civil riots. You know, all sorts of stuff. College riots going on, civil rights. And they were kind of looking through it. And he said, we need optimism, we need enthusiasm, we need excitement, and we need pace. Those are the 4 things that leaders should have. We're loads of excitement in what it is that we're doing. We've got to have tons of enthusiasm for doing it. We've got to show the world an optimistic point of view, and we need to have pace to get stuff done. We've got to move fast. Now, I look at that and think, do you know what? We could have written that last week.
Yes.
And some of my favorite YouTubers, people like Cleo Abrams, you know, she's built this phenomenal YouTube channel called Huge If True. And all she does is talk about technology in an optimistic way.
Yeah.
And the reason that she's built such a massive audience so quickly is because we're just hungry for more optimism. Yeah, you mentioned Simon before. I mean, if you asked him on a plane and you sat next to Simon Sinek and you said, what are you? And he's shared this on podcasts loads of times, but he's like, I'm an optimist. He doesn't give his job title. He doesn't talk about, you know, I'm a this and I'm a that. He's like, I'm an optimist. Because it begs the question, interesting. Okay, why?
Yeah.
Be optimistic about it.
Yeah.
Oh, but it's a little bit, I don't think I could get away with that. It's a bit cheesy, but I like that idea. But urgency plus optimism, that's a good,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes, it's very, very good. I'm so glad I asked you that question. It's also making me think again about Aaron Sorkin. We mentioned him early on, and I know we're both massive West Wing geeks, but and maybe he gets criticised for this a bit, but there's always something, however dark things and difficult things get, in every show, you see the light. You see a pinprick of light at the end of the tunnel. He never just leaves you completely bleak and cold. I don't know if that's your reading of it
I
as
think
well.
that's why people still love that show, though. Like 25 years after it was, airing, just because there was so much optimism. And Aaron Sorkin gets a bad, he takes a lot of stick for being this kind of, he's super idealistic in the way that his scripts are put together. But people want that. There is a place for that's kind of, this is what we want leaders to be like.
Yes.
And there is that kind of level of that sort of aspirational, we reach for the stars, the way that President Bartlett in The West Wing might speak. It's really attractive, and even though the show's a bit dated now, I mean, I've just started watching it again today.
My son has, and I
love
just
it.
peek over his shoulder. He hasn't got to the two cathedrals yet,
Oh,
but
really?
I'm waiting for that.
What a great episode. Yeah. There's a really good one, and I think I'm going to say it's episode 10 of season 4. I think it's called Game On. Well, it's definitely called Game On, but I can't remember which episode it is. But it's about 10 words. 10 words, 10 words. Leo McGarry's talking about 10 words all the way through. They're basically trying to find the strap line for the slogan to be able to beat, what's he called? Senator Ritchie, I think, in the debate.
Yes.
And they're looking for this 10 line because, in debating, 10 words can kill you. That's the tip of the sword. It's like the headline that the journalists write about and they can't find it. And there's this gorgeous moment. You can look at it on YouTube if you just search, 10 words or 10 word answers, The West Wing. It's about 3 minutes long. And it's this little monologue about how, 10 word answers can kill you because they're so sharp. But what about those 10 words? What happens after those 10 words? Then what? How are you going to do that? So I'm often writing headlines for scripts and stories, and I always think about the headline first. What are the 10 words going to be? Because that's a political device of what people will remember. Sum up the big story in 10 words. But you've also then going to think, right, what's next?
Yes.
A great West Wing phrase. What's next? Okay,
Yes.
what happens after that?
Yes.
But
yes.
That's probably one of my favorite episodes. It's not the popular one, but
yeah,
that's a good one.
I'm going to give your podcast. I know it's probably a couple of years old now, but the 10 word podcast. Everyone, if they're Aaron Sorkin fans, need to listen to part 1 and part 2 of that show. Are going to learn so much about Aaron. I was amazed that he wrote A Few Good Men on the back of cocktail mats in a bar, which told me...
While he was working off Broadway, in a bar, in between acts while everybody was out. Yeah.
Which just goes to show, if you've got a story to tell, then your body will make you tell it wherever you
After
are.
a napkin. Exactly.
Yeah, there you go. I'm going to ask you a really, really unfair question, but I can't not help ask you this because this has just been such an amazing conversation already. You've got 1,000 seconds, and there's a reason that I've chosen 1,000 seconds, and you're probably going to explain to the listeners why. To inspire a room full of internal comms pros. What are you going to say?
Oh, my goodness. Well, 1,000 seconds, folks, is 16 minutes and 40 seconds. I've been trying to write a book for ages that's never got off the ground, and maybe it never will. I had it as an idea for a podcast. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. But how to change the world in 1,000 seconds. Because if you look at some of the most powerful speeches that have ever been given, it's the weirdest coincidence that they're all roughly 16 or 17 minutes.
Amazing.
And some of them almost exactly. Look at like Vladimir Zelensky's New Year's address, exactly 1,000 seconds. Jerry Seinfeld, commencement. Simon Sinek's TED Talk, Brené Brown, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Think of Martin Luther King Dream Speech, 970 seconds. Kennedy's Moon Speech. We meet in an hour of change and challenge, decade of hope and fear, in an age of both knowledge and ignorance. All right, just over 1,000 seconds. The Moon Speech, probably the greatest technology speech that's ever been given, for lots of reasons. We put man on the moon within a decade. Yes. So I'm super passionate about that idea of 1,000 seconds, and I like it because no one's ever done anything with that before. People are like, what? 1,000 seconds, really? And there's a lot going on with that, and TED Talks have been kind of shaped around that. But I think if I was going to give a message around that idea of, could you change the world in 1,000 seconds? I'd probably start with a picture of Greta and probably her phrase, which she had as a title of a book, I think, at one point. No one's too small to make a difference. And I'd probably end with a phrase like an Obama quote of something like, you can change the world just by sharing your story. 10 words. Well, you can change the world just by sharing your story, 10 words. An Obama quote. But in the middle of that, you're probably going to be asking yourself, really? Obama types or, senior execs, you're in a boardroom with super senior people, you're at the UN, you're at Davos, you're COP, all these places. Who am I? Well, Greta. No one's too small to make a difference. It's actually, side note, but it's a really interesting exercise to go all the way back to Greta Thunberg's Instagram to her first posts. Because she had no idea what she was doing. People talk about, she was engineered this and she was an influencer that and she had this support. She had no clue. Everything was in Swedish, no hashtags, was all over the place,
Wow.
But no one's too small to make a difference. So I kind of look at that and think, are we okay if we go deep into a bit of the science with this?
Do.
Sorry, folks. I hope this is going to be really interesting, but bear with me. This is going to be awesome. But, okay, so no one's too small to make a difference. Change the world by sharing your story. In the middle of that gorgeous little sandwich, we have another West Wing quote from Margaret Mead, right? Wonderful anthropologist. Do you know the start of the quote? Katie?
Yes.
Never doubt that a small, thoughtful group of committed citizens can change the world.
Because
Why?
it's the only thing that ever has.
The only thing that ever has. Okay, so small, thoughtful group of committed citizens. Well, that sounds nice as well. It's lovely. It's, again, it's now if someone's to write a book that was called something like From Cascade to Conversation, which would probably be a great idea for a book. What they'd probably do is talk about how a lot of change doesn't come from the top down. It comes from the bottom up. Grassroots movements, right?
Yeah.
Lin-Manuel, Hamilton, I don't want a moment with turning this into a movement. There's a law of how movements happen, which worked for the climate change movement, of which Greta was absolutely at the right place at the right time. They'd call it Kairos with the perfect timing, but the climate movement, absolutely. Small group of people had a huge impact and very, very quickly bottom up. But you can also look at gay rights, civil rights, Black Lives Matter, Me Too. You can go abolition. You could go all the way back to women's vote, looking at a lot of the gay rights. 3.5% of any given group can influence everybody else to change.
Wow.
And there was a professor at Harvard that did a TED talk about it, a gorgeous lady called Erica Chenoweth. And she also looked at it from the point of view of non-violent civil disobedience. You want to try and overthrow a government without violence. We've just had Martin Luther King Day. You're thinking of Gandhi. 3.5%. So I might be looking at those internal comms folks who are thinking, am I too small to make a difference? And maybe there's 10 people in your team, and you're the catalyst that's going to change the way that world works. Maybe there's 100 people in your team and you're there thinking, what can I do? Well, in theory, if you've got the right tools and the right timing, right, the right mindset and the right message, you and 3 of your friends and colleagues who are similarly obsessed could influence you the 96 to change. And also, if you can extrapolate it out, because it is very similar to the laws of influencer marketing of where those influences come from to try and bring about some sort of change at scale. So the 3.5% rule.
Yes.
I love that. So that would be, there you go. I've just pitched my 1,000-second keynote. I'm sure we'd have a timer in the corner from 16 minutes 40, counting down. And maybe it ends on that final Obama quote. Change the world by sharing your story.
I love it. The other thing that answer made me think is that in internal communication, we're often struggling with a lack of budget, a lack of airtime. We just don't get kind of the resources always that our friends in, media relations, advertising, marketing get. But from everything you have said over the last 40 or 50 minutes, actually what we need is a little bit of obsession. We need to think about surprise. We need to get into the mind of our audience and really try to think about what piece of understanding or insight we want to impart to them. None of that actually requires huge budgets. So this is another wonderful thing about what you're saying. We can make a difference with the resources we've got, exactly where we are now, which I think is really inspiring.
Who said that quote? Do what you can with what you have where you are. Is it Roosevelt? Right, being Theodore Roosevelt, maybe?
Yes.
Do what you can with what you have where you are. Yeah,
Lovely.
I like that.
Love it. Love it. This question I do like asking people like you. You are clearly so inspiring. This whole conversation has been amazing. Before we head to those quick fire questions, where do you get your inspiration from?
Kids, my dog, Taylor Swift, Bob Dylan. You get it from wherever you can. You know,
Yeah.
you've got to go digging, and it's definitely not always there.
Right.
It's pretty hard out there at the moment. You know, I saw a study from MIT not long ago that was showing something like 80% of the thoughts that we have at work every day are negative. You know,
Wow.
and you've got people anxious and overwhelmed and underprepared for the challenges that it is. It's hard work, and it's not always there. We've not always got it. So you got to go digging. I find it in music and art personally. I mean, here's a little kind of a geeky thing that I do. I don't know if people appreciate. I love stationery. I work in AI, and I've registered some patents, and I'm working on some pretty cutting edge stuff that other people haven't done before, and that's great. But I also just love analog. I love stationery. I love ink. I love crayons. I collect fountain pens. It forces me to slow my brain down when I write in fountain pen. There's something gorgeous about you've got to wait for the ink to dry. It also forces you to think about not just what you're writing, but what you're going to write next. And as a left-handed fountain pen writer, that's, different penny slowing it down. But I'll look at things like what color of ink. I started to study things like color psychology. And some of that's interesting just in how you can put decks together and presentations, and you're looking at how a certain color is going to make a certain person feel. You can even do it in PowerPoint sometimes, in slide sort of view, like a Pixar artist would when they're looking at storyboards. But I'll look at different colored of inks and thinking that's going to make me feel a different way. And I've got all these different inks, but then it becomes magical because you get a gorgeous notebook with some nice, sexy paper, and I'll get my favorite pen and a certain color of ink, and I'm like, right, something magical is going to happen, right? Because there's nothing more exciting than a blank sheet of paper, but there's nothing more terrifying than a blank sheet of paper. And where I started from, I needed to find some inspiration a while ago, and I heard that Walt Disney used to write in brown ink. It's like, oh, that's interesting. And I went to the studios and had a look and did some digging around, and had some friends that showed me this specific shade of brown ink. And you can Google it. You can actually see his original Mickey Mouse drawings, because he hated drawing in black. Like everybody else, he said that the brush strokes or the pen strokes just don't have any structure. There's no texture to them. Where you do something in brown, and there's texture, and you can see the ink, and it's gorgeous. It becomes a totally different thing. So I bought exactly the same brown ink, and I started to write this creative script, and I've got all my favorite Walt Disney quotes in my mind. Storytellers instill hope time and time again. But I'm writing in brown ink, so I'm trying to channel,
Yes.
I'm actually writing in green ink at the moment because I'm slightly obsessed with John Batiste, who's just recorded a gorgeous album with Beethoven, like Beethoven Blues. And I'm writing with a fountain pen that is, the design inspiration is a Steinway piano, and it's got a gold nib. So it's got like the Beethoven colored ink with my John Batiste Steinway pen. And I'm writing about an Aaron Sorkin style dialogue, because Aaron Sorkin used to say, when I'm writing dialogue, I hear music, I don't hear words. There's a rhythm.
There's a
cadence to a really good, dialogue, a good walk and talk. So I find inspiration in little things like this.
I love it. I love it so much. And it's just setting you up for success before you even, what is it?
Make an event of it. You got to have some fun.
You've got to have
the business is hard. And seriously, writing in a different colored ink, if that's what does it for you, like,
go for it.
Exactly. Get some crayons. I love Blackwing pencils, and I'm obsessed with like Blackwing colors and really nice sheets and massive sheets of paper when you can draw everything in one go.
Yes. And we talked before about your sort of one pagers that show the level of detail that goes into these speeches. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing.
It's like
Amazing.
storytelling, speechwriting. it's easy to some folks when you don't know how to do it. It seems easy. When you see how it's done at the highest level, that you see a script or a story, and you realize that much work has gone into it, you're like, oh, okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
That's a really hard skill. Like, we need to stop calling storytelling a soft skill.
Yes.
Internal comms, especially. You know, our mutual friend, Rachel Miller, who's
Yes.
just absolutely amazing. Like, it is not a soft skill. It's
No.
really effing hard. That's why you need to value what it is that we do, and you need to pay for us as well. What we're worth.
This episode of the Internal Comms podcast is brought to you by the Internal Communication Masterclass. I've condensed more than 30 years of experience and expertise into this unique, on-demand learning journey. Gain the capability, the confidence, and the credibility to turbocharge your career. There are 8 work streams in this masterclass, which you can buy individually or as one learning journey. Each work stream comes with a downloadable coursebook with some compelling homework tasks and more useful resources. Visit icmasterclass.com. Now, this is an entirely on-demand program, so you can learn at your own pace, anytime, anywhere. Plus, there's no expiry date, so you can revisit the content whenever you wish. And as a listener to this show, you get a 30% discount off each workstream or the entire masterclass. Just pop the code podcast in at the checkout. Stand out from the crowd, gain that promotion, and feel re-energized and inspired. icmasterclass.com.
Right, I'm going to head to those quick fire questions, Jeremy. What would most surprise people about you?
Used to be a giraffe keeper. I used to climb willow trees very early in the morning for a reticulated giraffe called Etong, which was my favorite job in the world. Didn't get paid for it. But no, I took some time out after a business didn't work out and went to work at an animal park.
Oh, that's incredible.
My favorite animal in the world. I love giraffes so much.
Oh, wow. That's a good answer. What's one piece of bad advice or unhelpful thinking that has consistently dogged the comms profession, do you think?
I'd come back to that thing about soft skills.
Yes.
Like, can we just stop calling it that?
Yes.
And it's usually people that are not in the industry who call it a soft skill, but we let them get away with it. You know, the way that people communicate, you know, careers, a lot of social skills, the way that you conduct yourself in interviews and meetings, the way that you write a script or tell a story or present a certain thing. Oh, those are the soft skills. And also, we don't value those in the same way. It's the first budget to get cut.
Yes.
The budget's not often what it was originally. It's always nice to have when the going's good and there's spare cash lying around. It's like, great, you know, we invest in the soft skills. I want it to be when going's bad and it's tough and you're going through a heavy transformation and everything's at stake.
Yes.
You know, you've got to invest in storytelling and comms and encourage people to do better critical thinking, you know, and to look at that as a hard skill.
Yes.
And just not to dismiss it as a soft skill that's a nice to have if everything else has been taken care of.
Do you still meet people, executives, senior, C-suite level executives that are thinking to themselves, this is fluffy, nice to have stuff? And if you do, is there a killer line or is it not that simple that you'll use on them?
I don't mean this with any arrogance at all, but I don't
know
where I work at the moment just
Yeah.
because we've done such a good job internally of positioning it. I mean, sometimes it's maybe not always the most appropriate language, but we even think about some things in terms of how do you weaponize storytelling
Whoa.
in order to get stuff done?
Yeah.
Like, this is a hard skill. It's gonna drive sales. It's gonna build pipeline. It's gonna make you more efficient and productive. You'll save 5 hours a week using these things. You can build a CXO relationship in 30 days, not 60.
Right.
You know, you're going to increase this particular type of pipeline 22% faster. We put in very specific metrics on storytelling to show how it's got this direct economic impact. So I don't often have that problem. My problem is there's not enough people that can take this out to our 300,000 employees, which is why I'm spending so much time training AI assistants to be like digital twins of great coaches. When I go externally, I hear it all the time.
Right.
So often we're looking at some of the stuff I'm doing at IBM. We call them client zero stories. And I'm actually starting to spend more time now going out to see clients to show them what we're doing internally
Oh,
to try and help inspire them to think about their comms differently.
yes.
And the thing is, once you put the economic value on stuff and they're seeing that value, I want you to feel something so you do something, then great, you can see the light bulbs going on. And also comms teams and marketing, we love it because we get the headcount, we want the budget, we want to have that respect and credibility. We want to be sat on board seats. You don't
Yes.
want to just be, sat
Yeah.
at the back of the room waiting for your
Exactly.
turn to speak. Yeah.
Waiting for the crumbs.
Yeah.
What one book above all others should all comms professionals read?
I was thinking about this. I mean, there's so many books that I could recommend. Given we've had quite a practical chat today, it's been a little bit tactical. If you don't mind, I'd love to recommend a book from a friend of mine, Terry Szuplat. And he was Barack Obama's former speechwriter. He was kind of the workhorse in Obama's administration that was churning out a lot of the speeches. And they've got, they have a big speechwriting team. You've got Cody Keenan and John Favreau and just loads of amazing people. But Say It Well by Terry Szuplat, Szuplat. He's a gorgeous guy to follow on LinkedIn as well. But he's not done what a lot of people do when they leave office and they write their biography. He's actually created a really practical guide about how to write speeches. It's not the what and the why. It's about, give me the big hows. Show me how are you going to get this done? Like President Bartlett, don't just tell me the 10 words. Okay, great. What's next? How are you going to do that? And Terry's book for me is like this beautiful deep dive into how to craft better communications. And he's got advice and templates and a 50-25-25 rule. You'll get into it all. But it's a really easy read, but I think it's the best book on speaking and presenting that I've seen in at least the last 10 years.
How much does it all come back to? I was wondering about Ted. Is it Ted Sorensen who wrote for JFK?
JFK, yeah.
He came up with some amazing, very kind of brief lines about some advice. Is he a hero as well of yours?
Ted Sorensen's my number one hero.
Oh.
If there's one person I can model my career on, because he was a comms guy and he was an internal comms guy, Ted Sorensen, JFK speechwriter. And the lovely thing about Ted was that whilst he was a comms guy, he was also really strategic. Like he was in the room with, trying to solve the Cuban Missile Crisis, communicating with Castro. Like he's there making it happen in the room where it happens. Whilst he's also crafting the comms, he's doing like Sam Seaborn in The West Wing, modeled on a similar role. And I thought, I like that. I want to help craft the stories and the speeches, but I also want to be looking at the strategy and in the boardroom and trying to help make a difference. Yeah. And a lot of people won't really know this about JFK because we just have him down as being one of the greatest speakers of a generation. But at the beginning of his career, he was really bad. He was also on loads of drugs. He was a war hero, but he was very seriously injured in the war, shouldn't have survived. JFK always looks a bit awkward because he's got both buttons done up. It's because he's got a back brace on permanently and he's in so much pain.
Whoa.
He always had a walking cane, but he was never seen on camera with it. You can sometimes find clips. But he was high-pitched, never made eye contact, bad body language, squeaky, almost failed English at Harvard for being too wordy, and he was all over the place with his language. He met Ted Sorensen as a communications coach who helped him to be the JFK that we now know. We meet in an hour of change and challenge, ask not. And somebody asked Ted, it's a lovely thing maybe to end the pod on, because everything that we've covered in this amazing chat, you can kind of sum up with the advice that Ted Sorensen gave when somebody asked him, how do you write these amazing stories? Like, seriously, how would you write that inauguration speech and the peace speech at American University or the moon speech? It's like, is there a secret? Is there a trick? And he was like, it's dead easy. It's just about 4 words and 5 lines. That's all you need. And I love this because you, like back to Aaron Sorkin's Few Good Men, you can write this, folks, in the back of a napkin. Get your pens ready. 4 words and 5 lines. We need brevity, levity, clarity, and charity.
Oh,
brevity, right? Keep it short. We remember 12 minutes, food and sex, right? Short, don't speak for too long. Levity, you've got to keep it light because it's tough out there, especially if you're trying to simplify something complex, or if it's a really dark topic, ethics in AI, people losing their jobs. There's got to be levity in the way you communicate. You've got to have clarity, simplify complexity. You've got to have charity. We've got to have a purpose. We're in this together. How can we change the world, make it work better? So levity, brevity, clarity, and charity. And the 5 lines is dead simple. Every presentation, every story needs an outline. We talked about structure. It needs a headline. What are our 10 words? It needs a front line. What's the first thing you're going to say to get their attention? Maybe 75 words or less. I need a sideline. Some interesting quotes, anecdotes, movie, love Taylor Swift, was a giraffe keeper. Things that you can now add into your story to make it your own.
Yep.
And I need a bottom line. I need to get stuff done.
Yeah.
Urgency plus optimism equals action. So you want to feel something, so you do something. So I love it. Outline, headline, front line, sideline, bottom line, levity, brevity, clarity, charity.
Love it.
That's it.
Love it. Love it.
That's all there is to it. Dead easy. Soft skill.
Soft skill, if only. I have one final question. You might have answered it. We've literally got 2 minutes left. Borrowed from the Tim Ferriss show, you get a billboard, a metaphorical billboard for millions to see.
Oh, amazing.
You can put on that any message you like.
Are you paying for the billboard?
Yes, and we'll mock it up for you in Times Square, I promise.
Oh, do it. No, if you're mocking it for me anyway, I'd love this. My favorite quote in the whole world, which is kind of my life philosophy. I even apply this to LinkedIn, of all places. It's a Zig Ziglar quote, great sales trainer from the 1980s. He was around in the 70s, just a gorgeous, gorgeous human. Zig Ziglar, which is a wonderful name. You can have everything you want in life if you just help enough other people get what they want. Yeah. Can we put that on our billboard and people can just be like,
a message for our times.
I can have everything I want in life. Yeah, maybe the recent inauguration speech, it's not all about you. It's not just about short-term money. Let's see if we can help other folks do their thing.
Exactly. I cannot thank you enough. I'm getting a little bit emotional. It's been so fantastic, this conversation. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much. This was fun. This was awesome. Thank you for having me on. And thanks, folks, for listening. Those that have stayed with us, hopefully there's tons of nuggets that you've taken away. But awesome. Yeah, keep listening. And also do Katie's masterclass if you haven't done that already. It's amazing.
Thank you, Jeremy.
So that is a wrap for this episode of the Internal Comms podcast. Everything we talked about, the links and the full transcript, is all waiting for you on AB's website. That's abcom, abcom.co.uk. If something we talked about resonated with you, if it made you think differently, even for a moment, it would mean the world if you left a quick review or shared it with someone. That way, you're helping grow this community and helping other internal comms folks around the world find our show. We have some incredible guests lined up, so if you haven't already, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. Until we meet next time, lovely listeners, stay safe and well. And remember, it's what's inside that counts.